Our word of the week this week is a very specific form of the verb ginomai. Let's take a look. So meganoito is a negated form of ginomai in the optative mood, and it means it should never come to be, it should never happen, and it came to be an expression of abhorrence, something thought to be so off-putting, so unworthy of consideration, something so undesirable that by saying meganoito, you were ruling it out of possibility. You were essentially rhetorically spitting on the ground. Yuck, don't want to think about that. That's not even to be one of the possible options. So it's a negated wish. Eliminate it from thought. This thing shouldn't even be considered as an option. Notice it's an aorist active optative. The optative mood is the mood of possibility, of options. This shouldn't even be an option. I don't even want this to be on the list of things that could happen. Inconceivable. Have you seen The Princess Bride? You probably have seen The Princess Bride. One of people's favorite memories of that film is this little guy shouting, "Inconceivable!" Things kept happening. Things kept popping up on the radar screen that he thought shouldn't even be considered, right? Inconceivable. Meganoito doesn't literally mean inconceivable in that you can't think this thought. It's saying this notion is so off-putting and so abhorrent to me that I don't even want to entertain the idea. So that's our word of the week. Meganoito, aorist active optative, third person singular. It should not be. It should never come to happen, is what we're essentially looking at. So meganoito occurs 15 times in the New Testament. 14 of them are from Paul, with one from Luke. In the Luke use, Jesus tells a parable that's very confrontational to the religious folks and the leaders, and their reaction to the parable is meganoito, inconceivable. Don't even want to think about that. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at 5 occurrences of meganoito. We're going to just quickly breeze through them and just get a flavor of how this phrase meganoito is used. So first up, Romans chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. All of our readings today are from the ESV with the Koine supplied. So here's Romans 3, 3 through 4. What if some were unfaithful? Does their unfaithfulness nullify the faithfulness of God? By no means. Meganoito, inconceivable. Let God be true, though everyone were a liar, as it is written, that you may be justified in your words and prevail when you are judged. So note, the use here is in response to a somewhat ridiculous rhetorical question. If some people were unfaithful, does that mean that God was unfaithful? It's a ridiculous premise. So Paul inserts meganoito. That don't even entertain that idea. It's a ridiculous notion that because some people who purported to follow God were not faithful, that doesn't mean God was unfaithful. It means they were unfaithful, right? Let's carry on and look at the next one, Romans 6:15. What then? Are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means. Meganoito. Put it out of your mind. Don't even suggest such nonsense. So is grace a license to sin? Inconceivable. Right? He's saying that's a ridiculous premise. So notice the first two show us that when the premise is ridiculous, when it's an idea that probably isn't worthy of being entertained, meganoito is a great response. Next up, Galatians 2, verse 17 and 18. But if, in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not. Meganoito. For if I rebuild what I tore down, I prove myself to be a transgressor. So he says, if I make decisions that go against what Christ has done for me, that's not an indictment of Christ. That's just proof that I'm a jerk, right? So, meganoito, don't suggest that because of my bad actions, Christ is indicted, right? Let's go on and take a look at Galatians 3:21. Is the law then contrary to the promises of God? Certainly not. Meganoito, for if a law had been given that could give life, then righteousness would indeed be by the law. So if you take two things that God gave and my behavior makes it look like they're somehow contradictory, does that mean they're contradictory? Meganoito. Don't even entertain that notion. Inconceivable. That's an abhorrent thought. The two things that God gave were good. Their failure is rooted in my weakness, not in the gift that was given. And finally, 1 Corinthians 6:15 through 17. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Meganoito. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two will become one flesh. But he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. So he comes along, Paul does, with his argument, and he says, can the Christ follower continue in his or her pre-Christian ethic? Can you continue to do the stuff, live the life you lived prior? Is that a compatible dynamic? Meganoito, inconceivable. Don't even let that thought cross your mind. You can be joined to Christ or you can be joined to prostitutes, but not both. So he says, interestingly enough, he says earlier, your behavior is not an indictment of Christ, but here he says, if you're going to be affiliated with Christ, you have to make that decision, because if you decide you're going to try and live both lives with one foot on each side of the fence, you're going to be in danger of being speared on this fence. These things are not compatible. You shouldn't even consider this as a possibility. Meganoito. May this notion, may this thing never come into being. So that's our word of the week this week, meganoito from ginomai. It's an aorist active optative, third person singular. May it never come to pass. It should never happen. Optative because it's part of the options on the table. It's talking about what is possible, and it's saying this notion is so abhorrent that it shouldn't even be considered as a possibility. It's a great phrase. We've looked at 5 of them. There are 10 more in the New Testament. Go look for them and see what you think. I hope that was good for you. If it was, you know what to do. And until we see each other again, Karis Kairene Humin, grace and peace to you.